My father slid the folder across the table like it was nothing more than a dinner receipt, and in front of 30 relatives, he said, "Sign it, Hannah. You're not part of this family anymore." My mother didn't look at me. My sister smiled into her wine glass. My husband stayed silent. And just like that, everything I thought I had disappeared in one sentence. I remember the sound of forks hitting plates, the quiet whispers, the way no one stood up for me, not even once. If this story speaks to your heart, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if it truly resonates with you. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what your local time is right now. I always read them. I always wonder who's listening to stories like mine. My name is Hannah Brooks. I'm 33 years old, and this was the night my family erased me from their lives like I had never existed. But to understand how I ended up standing in that dining room, holding a pen I refused to use, you need to go back to where it really began, because families like mine don't break overnight. They crack slowly, quietly, in ways you don't even notice until it's too late. Growing up, there were two versions of life in our house, the one my sister lived and the one I survived. My younger sister, Claire, was everything my parents ever wanted: charming, outgoing, the kind of girl who could walk into a room and make people laugh within seconds. I was the opposite. Quiet. Predictable. The one who did what she was told and never caused trouble. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back now, I realized something much worse. I wasn't just the quiet one, I was the convenient one. The one they could rely on without ever needing to appreciate. When Claire forgot to pay her credit card, my parents covered it. When I worked double shifts to pay off my student loans, no one even asked if I was tired. Thanksgiving dinners, birthday parties, even Christmas morning, somehow, everything revolved around her. I set the table. I cleaned the kitchen. I made sure everything ran smoothly while she sat at the center of it all, laughing, talking, being seen, and I told myself it was fine. I told myself this is just how families work. But the truth is, there were signs. Small ones at first. Like the time my promotion at work didn't even get a congratulations because Claire had just started dating someone my mother approved of. Or the night I came home exhausted after a 1-2-hour shift, only to be told I needed to drive Claire to the airport at 5 a.m. because she had an important trip. I said yes. I always said yes. Because I thought, if I kept showing up, if I kept being reliable, eventually they would see me. Eventually, I would matter. What I didn't know was that Claire had already started telling them a different story about me. A story I wasn't there to defend. And by the time I realized what she'd been saying behind my back, it was already too late. When I think back on it now, the unfairness was never loud. It was quiet, almost polite, the kind that slips into everyday moments until it feels normal. Like the chipped blue plate I always used at dinner while Claire had the matching set. Or the way my mother would call her sweetheart and call me only when something needed to be done. "Hannah, can you set the table? Hannah, can you stay after and clean up?" Small things, constant things. The kind that build a story about who matters and who does not. And I learned my place early. I was the one who made things easier, not the one people celebrated. I remember one summer when I was 16, working 30 hours a week at a local grocery store to save for my first car, while Claire got a brand new one in the driveway, with a red ribbon on top. My father saying it was because she needed it for school activities. I did not argue, I just kept working, because that was what I did. I adapted, I adjusted, I stayed quiet. Even holidays followed the same pattern. I woke up before sunrise to help my mother cook, standing in a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and butter, while Claire walked in hours later in a soft sweater, hugged everyone, and sat down to eat. And no one questioned it, not once. I told myself it did not hurt, that I was stronger than needing that kind of attention, but strength has a way of turning into silence if you let it sit too long. And silence makes people comfortable treating you like you will never leave. By the time I was in my 20s, the pattern had only grown sharper. When Claire needed help with rent, my parents wired money the same day. When I mentioned struggling to cover my own bills, my father said, "You have always been independent. You will figure it out," like it was a compliment, like it did not mean they had already decided I was on my own. I built my life that way, piece by piece, working long hours, paying off loans, keeping everything steady, and somewhere along the way, I met Daniel, the man who would become my husband, and for a while, I thought maybe things were changing, that maybe I was finally building something that was mine, something outside of their expectations. He was kind, steady, the kind of person who listened when I spoke, and when he first met my family, he noticed things I had trained myself to ignore. The way my mother praised Claire for showing up late but did not even look up when I arrived on time. The way my father asked Claire about her plans but never asked me about mine. Daniel would squeeze my hand under the table, small, silent reminders that I was not invisible to everyone, and I held on to that. I held on to the idea that maybe I did not need their approval to feel like I mattered. But what I did not see, what I could not see yet, was that Claire had already started shifting something behind the scenes, small comments, subtle suggestions, conversations I was not part of. And the first real sign came one evening when my mother called me out of nowhere, her voice unusually cold, asking questions that did not make sense, about money, about trust, about things I had never done. And when I asked her what she meant, she just said, "We will talk about it soon," and hung up, and that was the moment I felt it. Something had changed. Something I could not yet explain, but deep down, I knew, whatever Claire had been saying, it was no longer small, and whatever came next, it was going to change everything. I did not confront Claire right away because part of me still believed there had to be some misunderstanding, something small that could be explained if I just stayed calm long enough. But that illusion did not last. It started with little shifts in tone. My father no longer picking up my calls, my mother answering in short sentences like she was measuring every word, and then Daniel mentioned something that made my stomach drop. He said, "Did you move money out of your parents' account?" And I remember staring at him because the question did not even make sense. I had never had access to their accounts. Not once, but the way he asked it told me something else. This was not a random thought. This was something he had heard. Something that had already been said out loud. I tried to laugh it off at first. I told him there had to be confusion, but that night I could not sleep. I kept replaying my mother's voice on the phone, the coldness, the distance, and the next morning, I checked my messages. There was a group text I had been removed from, a family thread I did not even know existed, but Daniel had seen part of it on my sister's phone days earlier when we were all at dinner. He had not told me because he thought it would upset me. But now it did more than that. It explained everything. He showed me what he remembered, phrases, not exact words, but enough. We trusted her. I cannot believe she would do this. She has always been good at hiding things. And the one that stayed with me, the one that did not leave. Claire tried to warn us. That was when it became clear, this was not an accident. This was a story being built, slowly, carefully, and I was not in the room when it was written. I called my mother that afternoon. I asked her directly, "What do you think I did?" There was a pause, long enough that I could hear her breathing, and then she said, "Hannah, do not make this harder than it already is." Harder for who? I wanted to ask, but I did not. Instead, I said, "Just tell me." And she finally did. She told me Claire had come to them weeks earlier, said I had been struggling financially, said I had borrowed money without telling anyone, says I had borrowed money, said I had access to certain documents through my father's office when I helped him once with paperwork, and that I had taken advantage of it. None of it was true, not even close. But the way my mother said it, it was not a question. It was already a conclusion. I asked if they had any proof, any actual evidence, and she said, "We have enough." And that was when I realized something that felt heavier than anger, heavier than hurt. They had chosen to believe her without ever asking me, without even giving me the chance to explain. Later that evening, my father sent me an email, one single attachment, a printed statement with numbers circled in red, transactions I had never seen before, and underneath it, a short message, "If you have anything to say, say it tomorrow night." That was it. No greeting, no warmth, just a deadline. I sat there staring at that screen, knowing exactly what was coming, knowing that whatever had been building behind my back was about to step into the open. And for the first time in my life, I understood that I was not walking into a conversation, I was walking into a verdict. I walked into that dinner knowing I was already alone, but I did not expect how quiet it would feel when it actually happened. The table was set like every other family gathering, the same dishes, the same glasses, the same seats, except this time no one smiled when I walked in. No one said hello. My father gestured for me to sit like I was a guest, not his daughter, and then he began, calmly, methodically, laying out accusations like they were facts, pointing to printed pages, numbers highlighted, transactions I had never seen, and every time I opened my mouth to speak, he would raise his hand slightly, not loudly, not aggressively, just enough to stop me, like my voice was something unnecessary. My mother kept her eyes on the table. My sister sat across from me, composed, almost concerned, as if she was watching someone unravel instead of being the one who started it. And when I finally said, "This is not true," no one reacted. Not one person asked a question. Not one person said, "Maybe we should check." They had already decided. That was the hardest part, not the accusation, but the certainty. After that night, everything closed in. My calls went unanswered. My messages stayed unread. I sent emails trying to explain, long ones at first, attaching my bank statements, offering to meet, to go through everything line by line. I even printed them out and mailed copies to the house, thinking maybe if they saw it physically, they would believe me. Days passed, then weeks, and the only response I received was a short text from my father. "We need space." Nothing else. No acknowledgement of what I sent, no interest in the truth, just distance. I tried Claire next. I called her 3 times in one day, left messages, kept my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking. "Please just tell me what you said," but she never called back. The silence was not accidental, it was intentional. And it stretched into every part of my life. Holidays came and went without an invitation. Birthdays passed without a message. Even Daniel started to change, not all at once, but slowly, asking fewer questions, looking at me differently. Like doubt had been planted and he did not know how to pull it out. One night he asked, "Are you sure there is nothing you are not telling me?" And that question hurt more than anything my family had said, because it meant the story had spread far enough to reach him too. I wrote one last letter after that. Not an email, not a text. A real letter. I sat at my kitchen table for hours, rewriting it, making sure every word was clear, every detail accounted for. I explained everything, step by step. I asked for one conversation, just one. I mailed it and waited. 3 days later, it came back, unopened, stamped return to sender, and I remember holding that envelope, staring at my own handwriting, realizing there was nothing left to say, nothing left to prove. I had been trying to fix something that no one else wanted fixed, and in that moment, something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet decision. I stopped calling, I stopped explaining, I stopped asking to be heard, and for the first time, I did not feel like I was losing them. I felt like I was finally letting go, because the truth was, they had already let go of me long before I ever walked away. The first week after I stopped trying to reach them felt strangely quiet, like the world had lost a constant background noise. I did not even realize was exhausting me, and for the first time in years. My days were only mine. I woke up, went to work, came home, and there was no message waiting to pull me back into something I could not fix, no expectation I had to meet. No version of myself I had to shrink into just to keep the peace, and it was uncomfortable at first. That kind of silence always is, but slowly. It started to feel like space, real space. The kind you can actually build something in. I focused on my work, not in a dramatic way, not like I was trying to prove anything, just consistently. Showing up, doing what needed to be done, learning things I had never given myself time to learn before, staying late when it mattered. Speaking up in meetings when I had something to say instead of holding it back, and over time, people noticed, not all at once, but in small ways. My name being included in conversations, my opinion being asked for instead of ignored, my work being trusted without question. And then one morning, about 8 months after everything fell apart, I walked into the office and saw something new on my desk, a small rectangular plate, brushed metal, simple, understated. It had my name on it, Hannah Brooks, Senior Operations Manager. I stood there for a moment longer than I should have, just looking at it, running my fingers across the letters like I needed to make sure it was real. No announcement, no celebration, just quiet recognition, and somehow that meant more. It was not given to me because I was someone's daughter or because I fit into a role someone else needed. It was mine because I had earned it. Day by day, decision by decision, and outside of work, my life settled into something steady. I found a smaller apartment closer to the office. Nothing flashy, just a place that felt like mine. I started cooking again, something I had not done in years because I was always too busy helping someone else. I filled my weekends with things that did not revolve around obligation, long walks, reading, sometimes just sitting in silence without feeling like I had to fill it. Daniel drifted out of my life not long after, quietly, without a fight, and I let him go the same way I had let everything else go, without chasing, without asking him to stay. Because I had learned what it feels like when someone chooses not to stand with you, and I was done trying to convince people to see me. The months turned into years, and somewhere along the way, the pain stopped being sharp. It became something else. Something distant, like a story I could tell without my voice shaking. And then one evening, just as I was finishing up a late meeting, my phone lit up with a number I had not seen in years. I almost ignored it, but something made me pause. And when I answered, there was a voice on the other end that felt both familiar and completely foreign, my mother. And the first thing she said was, "Hannah, we need you to come home." Like nothing had ever happened, like the last 6 years had not existed. And that is how I found myself standing at that front door again, looking at the same house, the same people, the same place that once defined everything, only this time. I was not the same person they had sent away. Life did not suddenly become perfect after that night. It just became quieter, clearer, like a room after everyone has finally left and you can hear your own thoughts again. I did not go back inside that house. I stayed on the porch while my mother stood there repeating, "We did not know. Hannah, we did not know." And my father held a folder in his hands, the same kind he once used to push me out. Only this time his voice was different, lower, uncertain. He told me Claire had admitted everything, that the story she told them had never been real, that the transactions were tied to her, not me, that she had been covering something and needed someone else to carry it, and for a moment, no one spoke, not even Claire, who stood a few steps behind them, quiet in a way I had never seen before. And I realized something then. The truth had finally arrived, but it had come too late to change anything that mattered. My mother took a step closer and said, "You can come back now. We will fix this." Like it was a broken object, like it was something that could be repaired if we just tried hard enough. And I remember looking at her, really looking at her, seeing the same person who once could not meet my eyes. And I felt no anger, no satisfaction, just distance. I said, "I am not something you fix when it becomes inconvenient." And my voice did not shake. I did not raise it. I just said it, simple and steady. And my father nodded slowly, like he understood something he should have understood years ago. I did not stay long after that. There was nothing left to prove. Nothing left to argue. I turned and walked back down the steps. And for the first time, I did not look back, not even once. And now, months later, my life is not loud or dramatic. But it is mine. I wake up in a place that feels like peace instead of pressure. I go to work where my name on that small metal plate still reminds me of who I became without them. I have conversations that do not feel like tests, and I make decisions that do not require permission. And I have learned something I wish I understood earlier. That love without respect will always ask you to shrink, and the moment you stop shrinking, it calls you difficult, or selfish, or wrong. But that does not mean you are. It just means you finally see clearly. If you are listening to this and you feel like you are always the one explaining, always the one trying to be understood, I hope you pause for a second and ask yourself who is actually listening, because protecting your peace is not betrayal, it is survival, and sometimes the people who raised you are not the people who get to keep you. I believe, in a quiet way, that something greater watches how we endure, that whether you call it God or the universe, there is a kind of balance that does not rush but always arrives, not to punish but to reveal, and when it does, it shows you exactly where you stand. My name is Hannah Brooks. I am 33 years old, and the lesson I want to leave with you is simple. You do not have to return to places that only learned your value after you left. Thank you for staying with me, for listening, for holding space for a story that once felt too heavy to carry alone. If any part of this felt familiar, you are not the only one, and you are not wrong for wanting more than what hurt you. If you want to share where you are watching from or what time it is for you right now, I would love to read it. And if this story stayed with you, you can follow along. There are more stories like this waiting, different lives, different choices, but the same quiet strength. And maybe in one of them, you will find a piece of your own story too.